Welcome to China Tech Talk, the weekly discussion of technology and startups here in China. I am John Artman, editor-in-chief of TechNode.com, joined as always by Matthew Brennan, founder of ChinaChannel. So this week, we've seen not just one, but three different new messaging apps come out of the China tech space. One is from Bytedance, parent of Douyin and Toutiao. One is from Smartisan-backed Kuairu, infamously of Bullet Messenger. And another one is from the company where a founder got arrested for distributing porn, QVOD. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about these. And of course, we'll be looking at what it means for WeChat. So I guess before we really kind of get into it, Matt, let's talk a little bit about the WeChat open class, which I think this, talking a little bit about the open class and about what WeChat is doing will give a bit of context when we go into comparing WeChat's chances against some of these new apps, or I should say perhaps some of these new apps and their chances up against WeChat. So Matt, you were there last week for the conference. How was it? How did it stack up against previous ones?
Yeah, it's my third one. So this year's WeChat Open Class annual conference, I felt. So the big talking point was Alan Zheng's 4-hour lecture, 4-hour monologue, which I think in Chinese tech media, I think everyone wrote about that. It was just absolutely everywhere. Alan Zheng still is, I believe he really is the closest thing to Steve Jobs in China. He's so revered, he's so looked up to. He's quite mysterious in some ways. And actually, he's a big Apple fan. I think throughout the talk, it became clear, how influenced he has become by Apple, actually, and the principles of design that they used, which he still holds on to today, even though they produce software, not hardware, right? So it's a little bit different, but there's a lot of parallels to be drawn, and so everyone was talking about that, which was great. The 4-hour talk was really amazing, and there was lots to cover in there in terms of he's talking about the history of WeChat, how they started out, and talking a lot about the design philosophy, why they do the things they do, why they don't do certain other things, and I think it helped a lot of people understand about WeChat, why it is the way it is. I wrote up some notes. Maybe we can put it in the show notes because 4 hours is really, really long, right? So there's tons to cover in there, and I wrote up some notes in English, and we'll put that in the show notes. And they're quite long, but it's all in there. And of course, he was talking about the recent update. So WeChat 7.0, which came out a couple of weeks ago now. I think it's been around, maybe less, but it's fairly new. In some ways controversial, I guess. Some people don't like it. What do you think, John? WeChat 7.0, are you happy with it? A lot of people don't actually like it.
I'm pretty indifferent to the update itself. I mean, from a personal perspective, and to clarify, it came out around Christmas time, so late December.
Yeah,
I remember because I had a party at my house around Christmas time, and one of the topics of conversations at the party was the 7.0 update. And so for me, I mean, I think again personally, I'm a bit indifferent. I do appreciate the UI update. It feels a lot cleaner. It's following on to the user interfaces of a lot of the modern apps. So following kind of a modern or up to date design sensibility. But everything else is basically the same. I mean, the time capsule feature, which I think that is perhaps the most interesting part of the update, I don't use it all. I mean, like I've never been the kind of person, like a real social media type person. And I've never really, I mean, Moments is something that I use very sparingly. I use WeChat, basically for its very, very basic functionality, which is interacting with people inside of a chat window, whether that's a group chat or a one-on-one. And so the time capsule itself, I think, again, for me, it's not that big of a deal, but I think there are some really interesting implications to the feature itself. Mikey Chi, he recently posted into your WeChat group this idea about how to use the time capsule feature as a way to tell kind of longer stories or to show off something a little bit longer. I mean, I think it's interesting, but again, I mean, like, even at this point, like Matt, like I saw that you have like a time capsule update, and I don't even care enough to look, to be honest. So, but again, so I think that from a personal perspective, it's kind of whatever. But kind of more from a professional standpoint, like I'm really kind of curious about why now? Why this feature and why now? I mean, did Alan go into any of that, or Matt? Maybe you could offer us some insight into that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about WeChat Stories. Yeah, definitely. I think that's the most interesting change. You're right. And you're correct to point out that very few users are actually using it right now. Right? It's been launched. It's been out there about 3 weeks. Right? And I think, at least from what I can see in all of the like hundreds of groups, and I mean, it's because you can check them from the groups, which is actually an interesting feature, right? Because it means that you can actually see WeChat stories from not just your contact list, but from anyone you're in a group with. Because when you post one of them, it's accessible from every group that you're in. So that's actually a very interesting part of it. It means that you can actually reach many more people than just the 5,000 limit of what you have on your WeChat contacts. But why now? Why now is a great question. And I think it's actually, well, first I'd like to point out that even from the notes, the release notes, there was a screenshot in there which showed that they actually had a live working version back in April, because one of the date stamps was on the conversation in there. I think that was a little nod from the team for those who wanted to pick up on it to show that actually, we've been working on this for ages. So if they had a working version of it up in April, I think you can probably assume they've been working on it for a couple of months before that. This has been, or pretty much, almost certainly a year that they've been testing this. And of course, stories as a format has been around for ages, right? And actually, what's interesting here is that if we look outside China for Instagram, Facebook, obviously Snapchat, who are the original innovators here, this stories format's been really, really popular. And if there's been so much written about how it's become very popular on Instagram, right? And Instagram is sort of taking over the throne of Snapchat for like what people think of when they think of stories. But in China, it's up until recently, it's been much less popular. Weibo's had it for a long time, but it hasn't really taken off there, to my understanding, which I was a little bit surprised by. I thought it would do much better. So we've got this situation again where there's a sort of imbalance between China and the rest of the world in terms of the internet ecosystems, where there's this format which has proved itself to be so popular, and Instagram's even running adverts on stories as well, right? So like you can, between people's stories, you can see adverts in there, so they're actually monetizing it already. But it's full screen video, it's very immersive, and it's very sticky and popular. And yet in China, there's not much of it up until recently. So I think it's only a matter of time before someone moved in, and we've seen that that's happened now. So the interesting thing will be is that WeChat's launched it, and now Douyin's launched it essentially as well, which we'll go into later on. So that's a pretty interesting dynamic.
Well, I think that was kind of my big question. Is this a response to Douyin to a certain degree? Is this like the way that WeChat can integrate short video somehow into into its social network. I mean, because it's like WeChat has had this ability to take sites, I believe, for quite some time, and now that I think of it, I'm not even sure if that feature is still available. But that feature in and of itself, I mean, it's been around for or it was around for a long time. I'm thinking back like 2015 or something like that. 'Cause I remember taking sites of my son when he was 2 or 3 years old. So this was quite a while ago. So that type of functionality has been inside of WeChat, but then here we see something a little bit different where you can add in stickers, you can put in music, you can put captions and all sorts of different things in there. But as usual, it's not a compelling feature, I think. And but at the same time, when Matt, you were talking about adoption rates, something really similar happened with mini programs as well. And part of it, I think, is that people just weren't sure exactly how to use them, and the ecosystem wasn't quite there. And then of course in this case with the time capsule or the stories or whatever you want to call them, there are no developers, and so you would think that adoption rates would be quite higher. And so I guess do you think? So should we talk about the ByteDance's new messenger first? Because the big question that I have is, is this enough to stave off, encroachment from Douyin? And so the issue before ByteDance launched this new messaging app was about attention, right? And how much time are people spending inside Douyin versus WeChat? And so that's a big question. But at the end of the day, no matter what, nothing could replace WeChat in terms of open rates and things like that, because at the end of the day, it's central to our lives here in China. Whereas Douyin is a bit of a one-trick pony. It's only for short video. It's not really for social. It's not for messaging. My life, anyone's life is not going to be centered around Douyin unless you're a KOL looking to build a business there. So do you think that the time capsule feature was a response to Douyin somehow, or do you think that this was part of a kind of a larger iteration process? As you mentioned, they've been working on it since April, but early last year is when Douyin really started to take off.
Sure. But the screenshots from April, right? So my point is that it's highly likely that it's at least 1 year, right, that they would have had the idea to move down this path. The way the WeChat team works is that they build out and they test so many, sometimes, usually tens, but it can be up to like hundreds of different versions of something before they release it. So it's likely that they've been iterating versions of this for a year at least, and could be much longer. Could be a year and a half. Could be up to 2 years. So is it a reaction to Douyin in that respect? It's not really. No, it's not. They were probably working on this before Douyin usage exploded, which was Spring Festival last year, right? So the thing that's really pushing this, I think, is Instagram, is Snapchat. People don't talk about that in the Chinese internet media so much, but it's. You could argue it's reactionary to Facebook. I think that would be a much better argument to make than it's reactionary to ByteDance.
But the market for WeChat's in China, right? Why would they be responding to Facebook? Because
it's been so successful. It's quite clearly something that works in social applications, and is a feature that's popular with users. And just like Alan Johnson in the speech, right? So he went into detail about how on the newsfeed in Moments, people are reluctant to post. And it's been like that for a while. Many people don't want to post on Moments. Maybe people don't even look at their Moments anymore, some people. And they're reluctant to post because a newsfeed like that has the problem that, number one, when you post on there, your whole contact list can potentially see it, which will include your boss, perhaps. It will include people who clients that you work for or work with. It might include your grandparents, things like that. So people are a little bit reluctant there, and then also that it's just become a place to show off, right? The things you post on Moments in some ways contribute to your personal brand and to the image that you want to put forward into the world. So people are careful. They create this sort of perfect life. This is much more worse on Instagram, right? Instagram's totally famous for this, right? It's like Instagram is a place where people show off and post very unrealistic photos about what their lifestyle is.
Really? I thought it was all real.
Well, it's almost like ridiculous to the level that it's done on Instagram. But the same effect does also happen on Moments, to a much less degree. Instagram's extreme, but WeChat also suffers from this due to the dynamics of how a newsfeed like that works. And Stories is quite different. The messages disappear after 24 hours. The way it's set up is it just encourages people to shoot a light, easy, fun content that they're not too pressured into making it look really nice. And that actually, when people start using stories, whether it's on Instagram or Snapchat or on WeChat, I think WeChat's suffering from this right now is that for most users, this is a very new, in China, people don't use Instagram, right? So this might be the first time they're using stories, and they're not used to how it's very unpolished. It's not something it's totally different from Moments. It's totally different from what they're used to doing. And at first, it seems a little bit like, what is this thing? It's kind of crap. It's like, why would I want to do that? It's a little tough to understand and get your head around it at first. I think people get over that quickly, but the initial impression of the feature is, I think, whether we're talking about on Snapchat or whether we're talking about on WeChat, for people who haven't used it, first-time users, it's a little bit sort of counterintuitive of like why this would be so popular.
Yeah, but I mean, but as you said, I mean, Facebook. It's one of those features where everyone's basically implementing it. So there must be something. It must be
right.
Well, it must be pretty successful.
Yeah. Well, video is the future, right?
Right.
Everybody agrees on that, and Alan John also said that in the speech, right? Like the future's video. Future's video will take over pictures in the future, especially with 5G and bandwidths getting just. Data just not being an issue at all in the future. Video is the obvious format, and video is compelling, and full screen video is the best. So the Stories is full screen micro video, so it's a very compelling format, and young people adopt it first, but eventually everyone will adopt it, and once they become familiar with it. So there's that aspect as well.
Okay, cool. So, so I think, I really want to ask this big question about, WeChat versus Bytedance. But I think before we really get into that, we need to talk about the new Bytedance messaging app. And so what it looks like is Douyin, but with a social network. And so it's a way for people to easily share videos, but then of course also to have friends, to message between each other, to share videos, and so on and so on. Would you say that description is accurate?
Douyin, description of Douyin is it's a Snapchat clone. Yeah, it's embarrassingly similar to Snapchat. Yeah, it's like shameless.
Okay. Yeah, because I noticed a tweet of yours from yesterday. So the announcement was January 15th. We're recording this on January 16th. Is basically that, Matt. You said that I'm quoting here: yet another Snapchat clone built on the pretty much non-existent TikTok social graph with no iOS version. You can imagine the size of relief at Tencent head office.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that nails it. I think. Tencent must be very happy.
So
at least with version 1, the question is, how do they take things forward from that very bad start?
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's the thing. I mean, so what's your first impression? I mean, is this a WeChat killer?
Version 1.0, absolutely no way. But the real question is where they take this. What's so interesting with what Bytedance is doing? So when you look at it, they're essentially from a position of they've got this super popular app which is very addictive and getting huge traffic. The first thing they did at they had their event yesterday as of recording this. I think it's the very first time that Bytedance has done that, to my knowledge. I mean, you would know more than me, John, like being in the media, properly in the media industry, right? Like, Bytedance doesn't have product announcement events, to my knowledge. Right?
No, they don't. They don't really do that. I mean, like they do have they've organized a few conferences, but nothing necessarily around
an announcement.
Products and product announcements, exactly.
Yeah, so this is Bytedance's first ever product announcement, which is in itself a big deal, I think. And the first thing they did was get up on the stage. The CEO of Douyin got up on the stage and just said basically, yeah, by the way, we've got 250 million daily active users now. Right, and that's pretty much all. The whole point of her talk was just like, to the internet industry, that that's all they want to hear. It's like we've got absolutely huge traffic now, like massive traffic, and that chart is still going up and to the right, very healthily. Right, so that's the point they're making is like, okay, pretty much whatever we do now is important. And even if I think, so the implication there is, for this new messaging app, even if they mess it up, it's still going to have some decent traffic and quite a lot of users, simply by the fact that Douyin now has just so many people using it on a daily basis. So that's the first point to make, that even if Bytedance sort of hashes this up, which they are basically doing right now, it's still going to have a lot of users. Because they've made it clear that this is their the direction they want to move into. Another point is that they also registered, a little side note here, like Doshan Wallet, Doshan Pay, Doshan Payments. They've registered trademarks for all of these things already last month, which indicate, and it has a wallet feature in there already. Doshan is probably likely to be a very big part of the strategy for Bytedance to move into payments. So they want to move into messaging. They want to move into payments. Obviously, and they want to move into social, and they want to build a social graph. Right? Bytedance is a content company now, but they're not really a social company. They say they are, of course, but the Douyin newsfeed of micro videos is social in some aspects, right? Like you leave comments on there. You might, there's live streaming in there where you can communicate with people. And I think heavy users and people who produce content on the platform will have some kind of social graph in there where they'll use it as a communications tool. But for the average user, nobody's really messaging in there. Nobody's really building a social network in there right now. And that's the problem that they have. It's like, okay, we have this amazing app where everyone's addicted to it and spending all these time watching micro videos. We know how to monetize that really, really well with adverts. That's great, but we've got no social graph, really. So this is how, I think yesterday their announcement is like the real point of it is like, this is Bytedance announcing that we are moving into social graph, that we are going to make big efforts now to create a social graph. And so version 1.0 is this Snapchat clone. But they also, I think just as important yesterday, the updated version of Douyin, they added this new feed. So the second tab at the bottom of the app now is called Friends. It used to be called Guanzhou, like the accounts you're following. They switched that out, and now it's called Friends. And when you go on that, it's a feed of your friends' stories videos. Like, so they've actually made a big change to the Douyin app, which I think is equally important as this new messaging app. And the changes are that they're pushing a news feed of friends' stories. So at the same time as WeChat's moved into stories, Douyin has moved into stories as well. So this is a really very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, but again, I mean, like it just shows the power of the format. But yeah, I mean, like you look at Douyin and it's a weak network. Similar, I think, to something like Reddit, for example, where on the one hand, it's topic based, and so you're going to be following topics that you're interested in, or specific creators that you're interested in, and maybe you'll be trading comments between people, but at the end of the day, like, you don't actually know anyone on the platform itself, and or maybe you do have some friends, but your main interaction channel is not going to be through Douyin. But I guess, I mean, I think the big question that I have is again, kind of going back to this, and I think this is probably a question a lot of people are asking, is will they be able to make a successful messaging social product? I mean, so as you mentioned, like, they've already registered trademarks around fintech. The Duoshan app itself has a wallet feature already in there. Douyin has been looking at mini programs for quite some time. So I mean, but it I don't know. For me, it feels like very unoriginal, which is quite surprising, because like Bytedance is. I mean, I think one of the reasons that they've been successful is because they've been able to create very original products, whereas now they're just kind of following the WeChat model of creating a platform. And like, I think the big question that I have is, I mean, as we've seen with Alibaba and Alipay, Alibaba has tried to make Alipay a social network. They've tried to include mini programs. They've tried their darndest to really make a competitor to WeChat, and they haven't done a good job for a few different reasons, I think. But one of the bigger ones is that they're not a social company. They're an e-commerce finance company, which is very, very different from what WeChat and Tencent is. So like, is Bytedance? I mean, like, can they make a social app? Can they make like this kind of super platform? Is it possible for them to do that? That's the big question that I have.
Yeah, that's a great parallel to draw, John. The example of Jifflebao. Alipay tried to do this years ago. People don't want to use Alipay for social communications because it already has a clear positioning as a payments tool. Same here. They've got the same problem. People don't naturally want to open up Douyin when you want to message someone. It's like counterintuitive. It's not what the positioning of the product's about at all. So changing that is really tough. It's interesting that people generally in the media think that this is Douyin attacking WeChat. I think it's much easier to make the case that this is Douyin attacking QQ. They've built a Snapchat clone here. Snapchat is for young girls. That's the core demographic of Snapchat in the States, right? That's the user group that first embraced Snapchat and took it to where it is today in terms of having being so important. What was that? This very young girls demographic, about 13 to 18-year-old young girls posting, just really loving Snapchat so much. And that demographic in China uses QQ for messaging, right? And so one of the points also that I took away from the Bytedance event yesterday was they were just really, really, really stressing again and again and again how young the company was, how the people working on the products, the product managers and the team were all like Zhou Hos, all people born in the 90s. And they just kept going on about that again and again. And that's to differentiate themselves from WeChat. Obviously, anything they do, like given that Alan Zheng's just given this amazing 4-hour talk and everyone's been talking about it, they want to, perhaps they want to point out that Alan Zheng's, quite old right now. He's in his 50s, I think, right? So like, they want to contrast there that hey, everyone loves Alan Zheng, but he's kind of an old man now, and like we're the young kids, and we're about being fresh ideas and new. But as you pointed out, John, like actually what they released is not fresh at all. It's just a Snapchat clone and not very innovative at all. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I think it says a lot. I mean, so I guess this is a question that I have, just real quick about the open class. So the WeChat event. I mean, like, to what degree do you think Alan Zhang or anyone from the WeChat team was trying to compare themselves to other competitors?
Yeah, I mean, that's another actually interesting point. When you compare these two events, at WeChat, although it's clear that they are obviously looking at everything around them, they stress the fact that WeChat has its own path, and WeChat's kind of unique product. It's very difficult for others to copy it due to its positioning, and we kind of choose our own way and do things in our own at our own pace, which we've talked about before. They've been testing this new feature for over a year, most likely. And in their own style, because the way that they've introduced stories is actually very different, compared to other applications. As you point out right now, like a lot of people aren't using it because they actually can't find it. It's kind of hidden at the moment. I think that will change. In fact, I'm sure that will change. This is just version 1.0, so they're releasing it in stages. But so they stressed that point, whereas Bytedance actually in their event, did reference WeChat a couple of times. They were openly saying, sort of like admitting that what they're doing is in a wider context, relevant to their competitors, and that they sort of by extension indicates that they're reactionary to what Tencent does.
Yeah, which is concerning. I mean, like, this is for me. This is kind of like basic psychology, right? Where, or it's a type of psychology, let's say, where if you're an alpha, so if you're one of the leaders, you're not really looking around so much at others, or if you are. I mean, it's dangerous to refer to them, because if you refer to them, then you are admitting a certain type of weakness, right? Because you're the one leading the way. You're looking forward. You're not looking side to side or backwards. Whereas if you're not leading, if you're second or third or fourth or whatever, then you are going to be referencing the leader. And I think it happens all the time. I mean, in I think the smartphone market is a really interesting example. Obviously things have changed quite a bit, but it used to be that Apple was the golden standard.
Yeah.
And like not even in smartphones. I mean, like, people, like, I've been in meetings where people were talking about like media products, and like they wanted to make whatever it is to be the Apple of whatever, and it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is like what we're talking about has nothing to do with smartphones, nothing to do with Apple. But there was this sense of like what Apple represents, like their commitment to quality and so on and so on. But even then, I mean, like, you look at startups all the time. We're the Netflix of whatever. We're the Facebook of whatever. We're WeChat on blockchain or something like that. And so everyone's always referencing the leader. And so I think that it's interesting, and like I don't really know what to make of it, because maybe on the one hand it is a bit inaccurate to call Bytedance innovative in a certain sense, because actually after I made that statement, I was actually thinking about it. And if you think about Toutiao, if you think about Douyin, and then of course now with Duoshan, I mean, maybe they're doing an Apple, in the sense that what Apple does is everyone complains that Apple's not innovative. Well, but the thing is, like, they've never been that innovative. What Apple does is they create, they're able to integrate fairly new technologies into a mature product, and then these technologies end up becoming mainstream. Whereas if you look at like Toutiao and if you look at Douyin, I mean, Douyin number one certainly was not original. Kuaishou had been doing short video for some time before Douyin hit the market. Toutiao, that was a news app basically when it was first released, and Xinlang had their news app. Tencent has their news app, and so on and so on. So in that sense, it's not innovative or original in a certain way, but what they were able to do in both cases was really bring to bear their technical expertise to create products that were very, very compelling. And so working on the back end recommendation technologies to create a very compelling products. But the fact that they keep referencing WeChat, I think is kind of concerning for me in terms of what's going on inside their company and how they're thinking about it. But also, I have to wonder, like, if they are, placing themselves against WeChat, to what degree is their core competency, which I think is artificial intelligence, to what degree is artificial intelligence actually applicable to a platform play, in terms of messaging and things like that, right?
Yeah. So 2 questions popped to my mind when you were saying all that, John. Number one, definitely, their core competency is AI. You're totally right, and they're a content company, and the real breakthrough they've had is being able to build world class algorithms to enable people to get the content they want to see, and to optimize those algorithms so that people spend more and more time in their applications consuming content. And in Douyin, that's video content, and in Toutiao, that's written content, and in all of their other apps and the properties that they've got now across the world, not just in China, they're using that same recommendation algorithm in order to optimize the content that's surfaced to the user and create and so that's really the breakthrough that they've had. And then beyond that, you're right, like messaging, that doesn't really apply to messaging so well. I was hoping, a small part of me, but when I was for the announcement yesterday, it was like, oh, maybe they've found some breakthrough. Maybe they've applied AI to messaging somehow and come up with something that's really cool. Part of me was excited about that, but the small part of me, it was a small part of me because, actually, it kind of just doesn't make sense to apply AI to messaging. It's just messaging is a solved area. It's applying that technology. I just can't see how that would work. It works on news feeds. It doesn't work so well on messaging boxes. That's you could remove spam using AI as Gmail does. That would work, but beyond that, I fail to see the applications. The other question I had was the impression I got, if someone in the tech industry in China has been trained well by their PR, they referencing their competitors by name is a little bit taboo. Would that be correct, John? In your understanding, I just kind of noticed that, on earnings calls and people who've interviews with founders or people who've been in the industry for a while, they're very, very careful not to talk about their competitors without referencing them directly.
Well, I think that's just best practice in general. I think number one, we don't you don't want to start a feud on the one hand, or maybe you do, but on the other hand, you do have to be a little bit careful about what you're saying about your competition for a variety of reasons, and I think legal is probably one of the biggest ones.
Right.
But certainly in China, you don't usually talk openly about competitors in general. Even in meetings I have with PR people, we usually don't talk about competition that much. You might try to ask some kind of basically anytime that we talk about competition, it's a bit of a sly conversation. We both know what we're talking about here, but we're not going to say the name.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So it leads to those conversations where that's exactly the point. Whereas, so that I think that's what's interesting is that once the cameras are off or once the media's gone, they obviously do talk about their competitors by name all the time, and how these companies are thinking about the dynamics within their industry and what they're doing, is very much, what is Alipay doing now, right? What's WeChat doing and thing. But then when it comes to them actually talking on camera about these things, they kind of hold back on they talk in very different language, I think, from how they actually talk in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. So So yeah, so I think it. I mean, but at the same time, so looking at kind of what ByteDance is trying to do. I mean, so they are moving more into messaging. They're in a soft launch kind of beta of their enterprise messenger. We at TechNode have actually been giving access, but we can't really talk too much about it publicly just yet. But I will say that it's really kind of interesting because on the one hand, with Doshan, they're kind of aiming against WeChat, and then with their new messenger Lark, they're kind of aiming against DingTalk, which is Alibaba's enterprise messenger. And Alibaba launched, it used to be called Laiwang, and it was supposed to be a WeChat direct competitor. They pivoted into enterprise a little bit after that because going against WeChat, it was very difficult. And TechNode, we use DingTalk. It's kind of similar to Slack, I suppose, if you're familiar with that. The UI is not as good. The UX is not as good. But there's a lot of really cool kind of admin features where you can, request time off. You can submit reimbursement requests. You can, apply for payments for certain things, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of really interesting functionality from a business perspective. For example, if I apply for a business trip and it gets approved, then I can just through DingTalk I can actually book my train tickets, my hotel, and all that stuff. I don't have to worry about reimbursement because the company will pay directly for that. So it's really, really cool. As a messenger, it's just kind of okay. But so one of the things that, again, I can't talk about it too much, but the thing is with Lark, the very first thing that came to mind is the design of it. I think that they're going in the right direction in terms of what someone like me is looking for in terms of design. And there's some really interesting kind of small little quality of life features that I think would be useful. They're very useful in an enterprise setting, and in some cases might actually be useful in a consumer setting as well. And so I think that we're talking a lot about Doshan, but also ByteDance they're just going into messaging in general. It's obviously part of a much broader strategy, and so looking at what they're doing with Lark makes me kind of I actually kind of have some hope about the potential of Doshan because they're pretty clear. I mean, I think it's going to be a pretty great product from what I can see so far.
Yeah, Lark's great. I'm much more bullish on that. So yeah, it's about building social graph, and that's the strategy. They need to long term. That's a very important part of the puzzle. Tencent's empire is basically essentially built on that. Everything they've done is built upon the fact that they have this very deep, complete social graph. That makes it easy to build out into other areas. ByteDance doesn't have that, so of course they're going to try. They have to try, and then doing a strategy of having a Snapchat for the young kids, the young girls to use, and then having a Lark, which is enterprise messenger for the businesses to use. And not going for the mainstream. You're not going to beat WeChat with another WeChat, right? That's not how you're not going to beat Baidu with another Baidu, right? That's why everyone's talking about Google coming back into China and taking, beating Baidu. It's just not going to happen, right? So that's not how the dynamics work. Once people's user habits are set and using a product, then it's very difficult to change that. And you need to offer something different with enough delta of improvement in order, or bundle it together with something else somehow, or move up the stack and when a new technology comes out, build something on a different layer that sort of makes the previous incumbent irrelevant. These are the ways that you disrupt something like WeChat. Not by building another WeChat. So it makes a lot of sense that they would go for Lark for enterprise messaging, which I think is still an open game right now. DingTalk's leading it; they're doing well, but there's still there's enterprise WeChat, and there's other players in there as well. And it seems to be a much more fragmented market. And then for the youngsters, young people, they change their habits all the time. That's actually another question I have about this messaging app Doshan is that young people, I got a question. If they're targeting that demographic, which it seems to be they are, like I imagine, the young people who are like on the cutting edge of app usage and like experimenting with all different kinds of like different social products. I imagine I do have a question that user base actually probably already thinks that Douyin is already too boring and old, that they might have actually moved on to like using other newer, for them more exciting different video products, because Douyin's become mainstream already, right? So like that might be part of the reason why they're trying to do this, is that they realize they might risk losing that original user base, because those young people, especially in China, Chinese young users, they're so fickle. Trying to keep them using one application for an extended period of time is really difficult for social products, I think. So there's kind of an element there as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one of the things that I've been concerned about with WeChat is something similar, which is the novelty factor. We saw with Bullet Messenger just how quickly the adoption rates were for that. Of course, they dropped just as precipitously because it wasn't as great as it could have been. But I mean, like the reason that people started using Bullet Messenger so quickly was because it was something new, it was something different. They could do things on Bullet Messenger that they can't do in WeChat, and this is something that I find to be absolutely fascinating. It's similar along the lines of Marshall McLuhan's often repeated phrase, the medium is the message. It's also similar with technology where the software defines the usage. And so, just by virtue of the fact of the way that WeChat is designed, there are certain things that you can do, there's certain things that you can't do, and there's certain behaviors that are possible, and certain behaviors that just are not. Whereas, a completely different app like Duoshan or Bullet Messenger, they're going to be designed with very different ideas in mind, and so there are going to be slight differences in how they actually can be used. And so I think that as a user, being constrained to think and act in a certain way, and then being given another option to think and behave in a different way can actually be very liberating. And so if designers can think about different ways to allow certain types of behavior that are more desirable from a user standpoint, then they are going to be more effective. And that's one of the things that's really annoying about WeChat is just how restrictive it is in terms of the certain types of things that you can do. And again, like with Lark, with Telegram, and with WhatsApp, there are certain really cool things that like it would be amazing if WeChat had those, or like like borrowing more ideas from Slack or something like that. Because at least for me, they're much more compelling products. But speaking of Bullet Messenger, we did want to talk a little bit about the other announcements that were made this week as well. So one, of course, is Bullet Messenger's new app, Liao Tianbao. Exactly. So it's the chat treasure. So do you treasure your chats, Matt?
Yeah. So I couldn't download it. It was that was it? I think so there's three of them. There was Martong, which is three announcements on one day. Martong, Liao Tianbao, and Duoshan. All of these are messaging products which, according to the media, are attacking WeChat. I think that's a bit of a simplification, but okay, let's go along with it. And then there's been other social applications as well come out recently. Not so recently, but like certainly over the past 12 months, there's been famously two of the original WeChat team members, Jeannie Lin and TS, who left WeChat to start their own startups in the social space, and they opened up apps called Pop and Echo, which are also targeting young users. There's an app called Soul, which has done quite well. It seems to be a revival of this space actually right now, that there's a lot of competitors in this. Like, it seems to be that the consensus among a lot of people is that there is an opportunity to attack, and certainly for young people, that they're wanting more from social applications. That they're just using QQ and WeChat is not enough, and so I think someone, they're all trying to crack this, and a lot of people feel there's an opportunity here to build something interesting and new for young people to enable social interactions, and we are seeing that there's some innovation in this area, that there's some experimentation going on. A lot of these apps are based around, several of them rather are based around like anonymous messaging. So this idea that you'll send a message, you'll be messaging with someone and actually not know who they are. You still have to real name verify yourself to get on all these applications, right? That's a basic requirement now of social apps in China, and in this kind of space. But the actual the person you're talking to might not know who you are, and that's kind of brings a level of freedom to the interaction. I think a lot of people in China are feeling, that. I don't know. I think there's always been that way. When you look back at the history of WeChat, in the early days, they released features like Friends Nearby, like Shake, where you could just shake your phone and find someone else shaking their phone at the same time. And these were seen as really, really innovative back in the day, right? And they were just like new ways to discover people and new ways to have social interaction. And that kind of like early experimentation is gone now. We don't see WeChat doing that. We don't see QQ doing that. So I think other people are picking up the slack of like trying to think of new ways for people to communicate and make friends.
But it's funny because, a similar thing happened last year as well, where a lot of different companies began to announce their ride-hailing solution. The biggest one, of course, was Meituan, and that's basically gone nowhere. Obviously, the industries are quite different, but I think the analogy is similar to what's happened with Facebook as well, where there is an opportunity to innovate and to provide different services and to allow different types of behaviors and different types of sharing and so on and so on. But it's going to be very, very difficult to actually topple the leading place of the current leader. And a lot of it is just user habit. I mean, just everyone uses WeChat. And I think that, network effects are such that, if you really want me to replace WeChat with something else, well, then you have to migrate my entire network over there. And the thing is, like with WeChat, I mean, I have everything. I have my friends, I have my family. I actually just got my mom on WeChat recently, and I'm kind of kicking myself. Why didn't I do that earlier? And of course there's work, and I don't necessarily like the mixing of professional and personal. The fact is that it's there, and so unless you can like actually migrate all of the entire network, my entire network from WeChat to a different app, there's no way that another app can compete on the same level.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen until we start using smart glasses or something equivalent.
But they're ready for that, right? So,
Well, we'll see. I mean, VR. I'm very bullish on VR and AR in the long run, where technology is not there, but it will happen. It's just a matter of time. We're not going to start. We're not going to keep looking at this small screen in our pockets forever.
No,
it's a momentarily. We'll look back on this in 20 years and be like, oh my God, we used to like. We talk about WeChat and be like this like screen in our pocket. How retarded was that back then? Like, it's going to look like the early days of the internet with PCs and like how the stuff we're doing now will look so basic.
Yeah, but that was referencing your QR code theory from a while back. You remember that promo video they had with the mini programs and the QR codes? Yeah. I mean that seems exactly it, and QR codes are amazing for that. But Matt, I think we're coming up on time. I mean, like so for me, this is a discussion that I wanted to have with you for quite some time, and I'm glad that we finally are. And I think just final words. Duoshan, I think, is going to be an interesting product. Bytedance, certainly they know how to create compelling products. The question is, can it compete against WeChat, or should WeChat be worried? I think that basically from our conversation, WeChat should be worried in the sense that it, just as Douyin it's taking away attention or time spent with WeChat and inside of WeChat. But at the end of the day, it's not going to come close to replacing it.
Yeah, they've got a two-pronged strategy. So the question is from you, should WeChat be generally worried? What can we really expect from this move from Bytedance, a year out from now, let's say? The question really lies in how do they build social network within Douyin first, and then Douyin is just where they're going to flip that out into, right? So Doushan's set up now, but in order for people to start using Doushan, they need to drive those people from Douyin. So it's the actual really much bigger question is how do they create social network within Douyin, and then how do they drive that over into Doushan? Right now, we don't know so much. We actually got an indicator yesterday with the new Friends newsfeed, Stories newsfeed, which they opened up just yesterday in Douyin. So the much bigger question is what changes do they make to Douyin? That's a lot less clear. And again, overall, I'm not so optimistic. On the one hand, you do have to be optimistic. 250 million daily active users. Anything they do is going to have millions of people using it. But on the other hand, changing that core user behavior, it's a really tricky job. I feel sorry for the product managers that have been tasked with this because moving that behavior from short video consumption on newsfeed down into social messaging, it's like a mission impossible, I think. But the parts of the puzzle are starting. Many large parts of the puzzle became clear yesterday of what they're trying to do.
And that's about all the time we have for this episode of China Tech Talk. As always, thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you gave us a review on iTunes, or you can go to Overcast or Pocket Cast and tap on that star button, and it will recommend this episode to your network. Also, we are on Himalaya and Spotify, so you can find us there if you haven't already. And also a quick reminder, TechNode, we do several newsletters every single day, including a curated summary of technology news in China, including some of the stuff from us, and a thrice weekly newsletter looking at significant fundings over the last couple of days. You can go to technode.com/newsletters to subscribe.